Hey, folks, and welcome back to the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we're talking about where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how to stop those leaks, how to bring women back when they step out of the workforce, and really some of the great supports that have been developing. There are so many women-founded, women-led organizations, just volunteer organizations. Some of them become nonprofits. One of the ones that really has stood out over the years is our next guest, Brianna Huber, and her 2O. Brianna, so good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Kat. Thanks for inviting us here.
Yeah. So, and actually, you know what? We met through a program that we've done off and on over the years at Water Citizen. I think Kyla brought you along from the Illinois Women of Water group that had formed. But we were doing these women water leader circles, right? It just, it's a mastermind format and give it, a private facilitated space for people to present stuff that they're working on. They'd like some peer support, and that was, I think that was about the time you were formulating this concept. Tell us a little about your background as a water professional, and then how her 2O came together.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kat. I think we did meet in maybe the year before her 2O legally was founded. So that was in my master planning phases of her 2O. So my background is actually in public health, on the medical side of public health, and I came into the water industry just about exactly 9 years ago. Actually, I had my 9-year anniversary last week, and I came into the industry by sheer desperation. I was in a position, great place to work, but the job that I was doing was very jading, and I had done it for 7 years and I was over it. And so I was applying for anything and everything I thought I qualified for. And one of those positions that I applied for was a chemist and assistant department head at a drinking water utility. And by the hands of God, I actually received the position and was offered the position. And I was a little bit terrified to take it because it was so different, but I took the leap of faith and I did take it. And it was quite a difference. I had always been in a more white collar workplace, and I had always been in a workplace that was a little more equal in terms of male and female representation. And so coming into a blue collar, industrial, male dominated industry, I didn't think it would be that different. But once I got into it, I realized exactly how different it is. And I always tell people that I spent the first several months of my transition into this industry with my stomach in knots, because it was different, and I'm a little averse to change. So seeing those changes and just starting to see the differences in how men and women function at work kind of opened my eyes a little bit to oh, this really is a thing in the world. Until you've worked in a male dominated industry, you don't necessarily understand that it is legit. There are some issues. Right. And so as I proceeded into my career, I would say maybe a year into it, I started to get involved. I launched the Illinois section, American Water Works Association's Women in Water Committee, but my brain was always thinking much larger than that. And I'm a researcher and a thinker. And so I just always knew that I wanted to do something international. And so I started kind of formulating her 2O in my head. And we officially launched legally in January of 2022. So her 2O is an international 501c3 nonprofit.
Nice. And so what are some of the sorts of things, and by the way, your comment about male dominated industry, and I've heard some women say, oh, we're not going to say male dominated, we're going to say male populated, because we're not dominated, we're powerful women and everything. But if you're in a very hierarchical organization, well, yeah, somebody who is at a higher level makes the decision. And if they make a decision that you don't belong, that is male dominated, or
Mm-hmm.
just that they're calling all the shots. That's not just male populated, that's male dominated. It's not just, I've yeah, was worked in an office once for the engineering division. They said, well, we're 50-50. And it's like, you're including all the secretaries and all the marketing staff.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when you look at, this was the memo that ended my career, was I was asked to do an analysis on our division. I just short memo and a little graph that showed, level 1, 2, 3. We had like one guy who was hard of hearing, a nephew of some client or something.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, it was all women. Everybody had either been promoted up or hired by the clients. And then one level 4 project manager. That's why I've been promoted up there, or transferred up there to run, manage the women that nobody wanted to manage. And then all the 5, 6, 7 associates and principals, all men. Okay? And suddenly,
Wow.
then, within 3 months, I got promoted to level 5, first woman eligible to be considered associate. 3 of my levels got promoted to level 4. 2 of the level 5 associates started, were put in charge of my projects and started just
Mm-hmm.
sabotaging them, complained to the, HR, got me put on probation like 3 months, like that fast.
Mm-hmm.
That's not
Wow.
just male populated. That's,
Yeah.
yeah. So you've got this organization, and there's really a couple of, from my experience of what I've seen of it, it's got a couple of different aspects to it. So I've seen things like the book club and some of those things, and some of the other organizations have that as well. But then there's this international aspect as well. What are you guys doing in that respect?
So from the international aspect, our overarching goal, if you might say, is to remove barriers and create opportunities for women's participation in water management. And so what that looks very different in different countries, and even within one country, it could look very different between states or towns even. And so we do not limit ourselves. A lot of organizations say that they do X, Y, and Z very specific thing. We do not limit ourselves in what we do, because whatever the women need is what we're here to do. So internationally, we are working to obviously recruit more women into the industry, but we have to remove barriers. So doing things like funding scholarships to get women into water and wastewater education programs, and really just advocating for them. We recently did our first WASH project, which we were very excited about. We did a program in Nairobi, Kenya, and we did menstrual hygiene education for 346 female middle school and primary school aged girls. We donated sanitary pads to every one of those girls, along with undergarments for them to wear. And then at the secondary school, we did an upgrade project to their sanitation facilities. So we upgraded the block of girls' restrooms, which that project is almost finished. And I cannot believe the transformation is really unbelievable when you think about where it started. But we upgraded the girls' block of restrooms. We installed a biodigester and an incinerator at that school so that they have proper sanitation and hygiene facilities, so they can attend school regularly instead of missing school every time that they have their period. So internationally, that's kind of what we're working towards, is the WASH projects and advocation, scholarships, mentoring. We have a project that has not yet been fully approved, but it would be a leadership development program for women in Ukraine, where we would do an exchange program and bring them into our utilities here in the United States and do some leadership development and laboratory training.
Yeah.
And then send them back to Ukraine. But I shouldn't speak too much about that, because that project is not a 100% go yet. But just to give you examples of the kind of things that we're currently working on.
That's fantastic. I know a lot of people who have done nonprofits, and they've done things like, doing, biosand filters, or train the trainers to teach people how to do their own biosand filters, or developing microeconomies around, water. But to do something at a local level, specifically around improving circumstances for women in both water and sanitation and in working in the industry. That I don't think I've seen. And, as opposed to something like opening a center to get, more girls excited about water, it's like there's a lot of programs out there to teach girls that, water is important, science is fun, and you too can have an
Yeah.
water. And it's like, let's actually get something on the ground.
We do. I mean, we kind of hit it at all levels. We are working on some toolkits that are aimed towards middle school age girls that talk about the water treatment process and the wastewater treatment process. And they're very girly. They're very pink. Not that all girls like pink. We know that not all girls like pink, but we also know that most materials that are of that age are generally centered around boys. And so we wanted girl-centric materials. And those toolkits are designed for girls anywhere in the world. So we were very sensitive to the types of materials and projects that we put into those toolkits to make sure that they could be completed by anybody. So we have a variety of things. It takes all levels. When we talk about systemic change, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we talk about the individual level, the interpersonal level, and the institutional level. And Her2O in one way or another.
Sorry, run that by me again. That was fast.
It's okay. It's the individual level,
Individual.
the interpersonal level,
Okay.
and the institutional level. And so Her2O's programming, we have a variety of programming, and we hit all of those levels in one way or another. We might not be completely comprehensive yet at each individual level, but we have programming that works towards bringing all three of those aspects together.
Yeah. Well, that's, because we are releasing this summit during United Nations Water. It is the first UN water since 1977. So it has been a long time coming, almost 50 years. And, and yet it's so, institutionalized. We didn't figure out the certification as an NGO, whatever. I know other people who had their certification and then couldn't come up with the money to go. So are they going to have a lot of the same old people sitting around the table, the same people who are at COP, the same people who are at, Commission on the Status of Women, sitting there and talking about water this week? That it can be on the institutional level, that to have some support, to have some representation, and this whole idea of women of water, combining SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals 5 and 6, that to have some of these homegrown initiatives by people who actually have a background in water, and I think that's important too, right?
Yeah, so I think the perspective is a lot different when you have actually worked in water. And even as I started, it's really funny because I'm now the director of my drinking water utility. So even when I came in as the assistant director, I was the first female manager in any public works area of my city, and I'm still the only female manager in public works. Now I have hired 3 females since then, so there are more females at least in the water utility. And that actually I wasn't actively looking for females. I still try to be very equitable. I don't want to reverse discriminate, but these women were the most qualified for the job, which is fantastic, right? But I do think that, as I have developed Her2O, and I've heard these stories from women, but the longer I'm in the industry, the more I actually experience some of these more, I don't want to say extravagant or elaborate, but higher degree experiences that I hear other women sharing about all the time. And it's like, I can't believe that everybody knows that I have Her2O. Everybody knows that I'm a feminist. Everybody knows I'm advocating for women in water. And I'm still having these experiences. Like, they couldn't care less. They know they're making an example of themselves and they couldn't care less.
Yeah. And I think I actually might have been a little late getting out of the gate with this summit, in part because I had actually put in for an application for a position that just seemed so perfect for me, with a large organization leading an education center on water, and or a meeting center on water, and so completely up my alley. And yet whether I was going to be selected by basically men, and and not just as a woman, but also as a woman who has been in leadership, who has been around a little longer, and there it's very safe to hire people who are significantly younger, right?
I mean, I guess it depends on what your opinion is. I think there's pros and cons. People who have experience bring just that experience. They bring wisdom, they bring maturity.
Yeah.
But hiring young professionals also brings excitement and passion that people who've been in the industry for many years may not have as high of a level of anymore. And it also brings, I think my favorite part, well, you can sculpt young professionals to be the kind of professional that you want them to be. But my favorite part about young professionals is that they have not had the restraints of experience put within them. So they can think outside of the box very easily, and they can ask questions that for most of us have always been no, because we just can't do that. Well, then they question, but why can't we do that?
Yeah.
And you talk through it and you're like, actually, why can't we do that? Let's give that a try. So I think there's pros and cons to experienced and young professionals. Having a good mix on your team is a good plan.
And I think perhaps, someone like me, and many others, when women step out, whether it's to raise their kids or personal health or, some kind of entrepreneurial venture, and then come in, they come back in with that new perspective and with that passion and knowing that this is what they want to do, right?
Yeah.
Combined with the years of experience and the years of perspective and all the connections and all that. So I think there is that tendency to say, well, once someone has stepped out, they're gone. That's that leaking pipeline, right? And if we don't provide that on ramp for them, there's that's a loss of human potential.
Yeah, it is. It is definitely a loss of human potential. And the number of women who step away to have children or just take a break, they want to dabble in something else for a little while, and then they realize water and wastewater was truly their passion and they want to come back to it. It really is a shame when we don't invite these people back in, because I think so oftentimes the workforce looks at, well, they took this break, they're not up to date on things, they're not in with the current trends, they made an active decision to leave the industry. But we still need all those minds on board. I always say, this is a male dominated industry and we're solving the world's most significant challenges. If we don't have water and sanitation for all, which we know we don't have anywhere near all covered at this point, but we're solving the world's most significant challenges and we're only using half the brain power, because half the population is men, half the population is women, roughly. And that doesn't make any sense. Like, why would we not want all men on board? So I do think it is a shame when we waste the opportunity to let women, back into the industry after they've taken a break for whatever reason.
At the workforce conference, I heard you give a presentation. I don't know if I know it's late there tonight. You have it all off the top of your head, but you were presenting. You had actually done some research, and I think this is important. We've had people like Stephanie Slocum, who also does Engineers Rising. As far as I know, you're really the only one who's had a formal study of women in water. I mean, not including the Brookings study. I mean, they're, grant to Brookings. They gave it to some young man just out of college at the time that he started, and he goes and looks at the, Bureau of Labor Statistics and say, oh, what has to do with water? Oh, I know plumbers, and they're all like plumbers kind of skewing the whole data. But you did qualitative, like actually doing surveys. Tell us about this study and what did you find?
So I did the study. I was very careful actually to do, at the time that I started thinking about this research project, I was a MBA graduate student. And I thought, I mean, to be honest with you, it didn't really fit into my MBA program, but I asked if I could do an independent study because I wanted this research to go through the rigor of a review board at a graduate level. And so I had to go through all of the processes of any other like thesis or graduate PhD level research. and make sure that the research, was in fact credible and not biased in any way. And so we looked at a lot of things. There's a lot of research that needs to be done in the area of women in water and sanitation and in diversity, equity, and inclusion, period, across the board. But we focused on women because that's what Her2O focuses on. We did kind of try and mirror the survey, like a women's version and a men's version. And that's not to sound uninclusive of those who don't identify as female or male. But we wanted to be able to have a true comparison. And so, yeah, I mean, we touched on all kinds of things. We talked about sexual harassment and gender discrimination. We talked about workforce and barriers to entry, as well as barriers once you are actually in the industry, like that you're experiencing when you're in the industry. We talked about equal pay. We talked about benefits and what benefits men and women need to feel supported at work and to do their best at work. And so we have a lot more research to do. There's a lot, these topics need to be deep dived into. But we tried to just hit the surface, and we found a lot of really good quality information that speaks to a little bit of what our conversation is, kind of the underlying theme that has appeared in our conversation this afternoon. And that is, why are women leaving the workforce? And so if it's okay with you, I will just share some stats that we found when we did our research about barriers that women experience and just general experiences, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want, I can even let's see, I can even let you share your screen if you'd like.
I don't have any fancy
Okay.
slides up, so we don't need to share the screen.
No problem. Okay, good.
So we hit on a whole range of things, but some of the things that spoke out to me the most, which I think hit the hardest, and they kind of they touch into the realm of emotional intelligence in the workplace. And so one of the questions that we asked is, had these people that participated in the survey, which was nationwide in the United States, had they experienced these things? And we found that 57% of females had experienced feeling that their male peers think they are incompetent. So the typical, I work, I have all these degrees, but I'm still perceived as not being competent. 42% of females experienced receiving less or no recognition for the same work as their male peers. 60% of females feel that they are not being heard by their male peers. 34% receive less pay for the same work. And this is one thing that there is some differentiation on. 23% of females feel intimidated by the physical requirements of some of the work in the water and sanitation sector. And just to give you an example, without going into too much detail, because we could talk for hours about this research, men felt more intimidated by the educational requirements. So we see like a direct inverse. So we know that women nowadays are more educated than men on average, and men feel intimidated by the education and the licensing requirements, while men are physically, generally, genetically born with a little bit more physical ability, and women are feeling, insufficient and intimidated by the physical requirements of the job. And then two more things I want to hit on really quickly, because these are really important topics. Sexual harassment in the workplace. 52% of females had experienced sexual harassment from their male peers, and 53% had experienced gender bias from their male peers. To give you perspective, 4% of men said that they had experienced sexual harassment. 7% of men had experienced sexual harassment from female peers, and 29% said that they had felt that they experienced gender bias from their female peers. So men are significantly less, especially when it comes to the sexual harassment. And I could tell you plenty of stories of sexually inappropriate things that I've experienced at conferences and vendor meetings and whatnot, but I won't go into that.
Well, and the thing is that, we have to be able to go into that. And I know we're, time wise, so I probably talked too much before I started. But you know, I think women are scared to say something. I think they
Mhm.
are concerned that of retaliation.
Yeah.
We talked to the new DI, relatively new chief DEI officer at Metropolitan Water District, and you've probably seen the LA Times articles that came out, about a year and a half ago from, women who were being bullied and harassed. Um, that and especially there were women who, as we started preparing for this summit, we were putting out a bunch of memes and things about different statistics, and an engineering week, and International Women's Week and whatever. And we were getting some very impassioned comments, especially when we were in the private groups. And yet, when I asked women if they wanted to speak, they might get on a call with me and go into the stories,
Hmm.
but they didn't want to be on camera. Um, and they're concerned that, well, there's so much to lose at that point, right? If you're up for promotion, if you're up for tenure, if you're up for, or just a possibility of losing your job altogether. It's and then when you have, and I've discovered this, having an engineering degree, having a PhD, having a water degree, you can't get anything other jobs. You can't even go work, wait tables, or get a temp job as a secretary, because like, oh, you're overqualified, you'd be bored, you wouldn't want this. I mean, we
Right.
train women for these very specialized positions, and then suddenly they can't do anything else, and they can't get back in their field. And how does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. And I want to just second what you have said here, because, when when I founded Her 2O, I thought, oh, this is just what women need. Like, I'm sassy enough to put it out there under my name. Like, you can share your stories and I'll never reveal who you are, where they came from, or, even what your job title is in the industry. But I will put it out there. And Her 2O actually has two initiatives. One is called Hear Me, and one is called See Me. And we put a call out for under both. And Hear Me is about women sharing the experiences that they've had, good or bad, as women in the water and sanitation sector. And they can submit them completely anonymously. And we will do, like, if we read it and we feel like we've heard, we see something there that could be telling of who this could be or what organization it might have happened from, we'll make sure that that is removed. And in the entire time that Hear Me has been launched with, I'll admit I haven't promoted too hard. We got like 9 responses. And I was shocked that these women are willing to come to our support and networking calls and spill their hearts and share, these tough experiences that they're going through, whether it's in their personal life or their professional life, whether it's sexual harassment or gender discrimination, or just being treated unfairly at work, or just challenging. They're just challenged. They're overwhelmed. It has nothing to do with how anybody's treating them. Whatever it is, they're not willing to go on record for the most part because of that fear of retaliation. Or I don't know. I don't know what other reasons it could be, but it has been always very surprising to me that people are not willing to use the voice of Her 2O as a cover to make sure that it's understood what's really happening. And that's not to, I don't want to give a false impression that every woman is experiencing discrimination or inequality or injustice or, discrimination or harassment or anything like that. But there are several women experiencing things like this. And I think the industry as a whole turns a blind eye to it.
Yeah.
DEI is becoming more important. It's being put out there more often, but there's still this like overwhelming response of, oh, that's not really happening.
Yeah.
But it is.
Yeah. 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 I've had someone say, I had a back spasm. I'm lying on the table getting a massage, and the guy, he has big, I, he's like, oh, so what do you do? I'm talking about this diversity stuff. He's like, I don't believe that, I think that's all just economic. And once, the economics goes away, this diversity stuff isn't even real. And it's like,
Mhm.
how am I supposed to even argue to that while I'm lying on the table?
Yeah.
Close on. One of the sessions that we've had, just an interview with Jackie Abram, who wrote Hush Money, how one woman proved systemic racism in her workplace and kept her job. And and a lot of this, as we talked about in the interview, really applies to sexism, especially within these, male dominated industries, when there is someone who's not just making, random comments or being annoying, but actually in a position of authority who doesn't think you belong there and is willing to take steps to do that while making it look like they're celebrating diversity in the public space, but manipulating the system. And,
Right.
this book is really it's like a guidance manual, like what to do, how to keep track of it. And just every chapter is another little example. And she thinks that there's a fictional, like a composite character of her and her daughters that, thinks that she's overcoming, and, and, oh, now it's better. And then goes, and so I thought. And it's like that. It's like one after another, and then nobody believing you, nobody having it,
Right.
not having it, especially even with other women, if they haven't had it happen to them. If it's
Right.
women in HR, if it's women in, marketing, women in other fields or whatever, that may not meet with that level of hostility because those are acceptable fields for women to be in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a lot to take apart, Kat. In this short amount of time. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that there are these preformed ideas about what's acceptable for a woman to do in the workplace and how women should behave in the workplace. And one of the things that we touched on in our research was, how have you changed yourself as a female to try and fit in this industry? And there's a lot of information on that, and I don't want to take too much time going off of it, but women expressed, like 63% of women express changing their level of aggressiveness or passiveness at work. So they're literally changing their personality and who they typically are naturally. 23% change their level of ambition, 27% change their body language, 48% changed how they dress, 15% changed how they did their hair, 11% changed how they did their makeup. And so, I don't think that people realize women are working really hard and like sacrificing who they are on multiple levels to try and fit into this industry.
And even
And so,
changing their bodies, talk to people who, massive weight loss or breast reduction, to make sure that they can actually show up at work and not have people staring at their chest.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of different things going on multiple levels and many different facets. But I think that, unfortunately, I don't think until we really do more research and we put more information out there and we keep telling these stories and we keep writing books like Hush Money and having virtual summits that highlight the experiences of women and what they have gathered, whether it be from formal research or just conversations with other women about women's experience in the industry. Until we keep pushing that, we're not going to see change, and we have to keep pushing at all three of those levels that I mentioned earlier.
And have the funding to go with that.
Yeah, we absolutely.
All of the funding goes to, oh yeah, all we have to do is teach seventh grade girls that, water support and size is fun, get more young women into the field, cram them into the front of the pipeline, but that it's too controversial or too just, or no, I don't think it's really real because we don't have research to prove that, I mean, the whole survey, the longitudinal study at MIT that a lot of people bring up, the 40% of engineering women in all engineering that either drop out within 10 years or don't even go into engineering. People know that
Yeah.
step, but if you look at the study, they went deep. They had, women keeping diaries and everything. And
Hmm.
already that data is kind of dated. There isn't a lot
Yeah.
of, and the National Academy of Sciences study that was turned into Picture of Scientist
Hmm.
documentary, you know, that's already did it. And so people are already discrediting it because they say, oh, well, that was years ago. But now we've got all these new millennial women. Now we've got everything's equal. And a lot of them don't even see it until they get up into leadership. And I was the exact
Yeah.
same way. I thought I had all the degrees. I had done everything right to get the right experience. I didn't have kids. I was ready to, 110% do whatever it took to become that first woman associate. And there were guys who just flat out didn't want me there, as didn't want women
Yeah.
there, sending out a memo to the entire division saying, you're prohibited from using the color pink in any of your maps because pink is not an engineering color.
So that's really interesting that you say that. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I recently created some outreach materials for my utility. And it was like a series, and so each series had a primary color that ran through the entire series, and then a secondary color that helped to differentiate. This is about this topic, this is about this topic, this is about that topic. And feedback that I got from a male staff in a different department, because I like to have other people read things and make sure they're clear. And do you have any questions about this? Before I put it out. And the comment that I got was, "Don't use pink. Nobody can. People who are colorblind have problems with pink." Well, if you go and you look about creating materials for people with color blindness, shades of red and shades of blue are actually the best colors to use. Anyways, I could correct me if I'm wrong, but all the research that I have ever done points you to shades of red and shades of blue. And so I thought, is it the pink that he has a problem with because he thinks it causes an issue for people with color blindness, or does he just not want pink materials put out in public? Needless to say, I printed pink materials. They're on the website. They're pink. So yeah, and if you notice my headshot, I have a pink blazer on. I have some with a pink hard hat on. I have pink steel-toed boots that I wear to work. Pink is my favorite color, so I'm going to pink it out as much as I want. But going back to the comments that you made previously about funding, when I first founded Her2O, I did a decent amount of research to try and find some grant support to support some of our programs, to support this kind of organization, period. And there's really not anything out there. If you go for like women's empowerment or something like that, it's specifically related to women, you can find some money. Specifically related to water and sanitation, you can find some money. There's no money for the niche of women in water and sanitation, and we need money for that very specific cause. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because that's a really good point.
And it's not just for, oh, those poor women, let's go help those for you. You could have some for a nonprofit that their mission is to help poor women with buckets on their heads that walk uphill 5 miles both ways,
Right.
chased by a tiger and getting raped and not going to school. Or in the US, the battered women, it's a rescuing women money. But not
Yeah.
only we're trying to get empowered by getting into these fields. And it's not just about another program for kids that introduces them to water, and that's great. I'm all for it. We've had a number of people talk about Girl Scouts and getting their badges and everything, and but that's not enough. And
No, it's really not.
yeah. And I have especially with women who are changing careers. I have a woman who's supporting me on this program. She works for an association, but she also volunteers her time, who just got her degree 15 years at Walmart in logistics, and then got into Wellesley as a Davis Scholar, one of these non-traditional scholars. And by the time she got out with her geosciences degree, she's already over 35. So she's aged out of the professional programs. She's not going to get the discounts at AWWA and all that, because she's a professional, but she's just starting her career.
And what else we need funding for? Research about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the water and sanitation sector. Sheryl Sandberg does some great work in corporate America, but that's corporate America. And we can't have every industry in the United States or around the world looking at one sector of the work industry and applying it equally to their own sector, because it's not always exactly equally. So if we want true change, we need to truly understand. We need a baseline. We need sex disaggregated data that tells a true story of where we're at. And that's not just the case in, third world countries where women have no say whatsoever in water management in their community. It's the same in the United States and Canada and European countries and developed countries. I think it's really interesting. I went to the UN Commission on the Status of Women in 2019, and what was really surprising to me, now remember that was at the very beginning of Her2O, before we were even legal. What was really surprising to me is that this is supposed to be the largest gathering of women focused on women, and the United States was like not really part of the conversation. There were US representatives talking about projects that they had done in other countries, which is fantastic and absolutely needed. Obviously, Her2O has on board with that too, but nobody was talking about what needs to happen in the United States. It's like we feel like we've achieved gender equity in the US, and we have done some great things over the years for gender equity in the US, but there's so much more work to be done. And I feel like it's just basically been abandoned. Like nobody's talking about it.
I had this theory, and I shared it with a woman from MWD, that one of the things that may have been behind the issues with all these women operators coming in is that there is this little operator program that had been bouncing around, is the oldest in the US, or is certainly the oldest in California, like 40 years, to all these different community colleges. And this school in like East San Diego County, Cuyamaca College, it's like, oh, we already got a landscaping pool. We got a building you can use. They moved it in there. They got all these big companies to like create this great outdoor, test, place where they could like, the students could get hands-on experience with Mueller on this and Badger on that. But like, how were they going to find students to come all the way out to the desert? Oh,
right.
They got a grant, and they got some grant writer, and they got some massive amount of money to get women in. And actually, the two old guys that were running it, the old operator dude and the old, retired engineer, I actually called them up because they were going to do this Women of Water. And you're familiar with the San Diego Women of Water. It came out of these conferences these guys started having with this money, and they didn't think there was going to be much. But this is an area where Maureen Sullivan was head of San Diego Water. And you notice, as in your case, when a woman's at the top, more women are likely to go work for them. So suddenly, there's a lot of women in the smaller utilities all over San Diego County. And they had so many women show up, they had to get another room across the way. But when I called them up to get like a quote, he said, all right, we'll be here at 3:00, come for the interview. And I was in San Diego proper with no car. I'd like figure out how to get a trade all the way out, the little commuter bus or Uber. I can't remember what it was. I finally got myself out there. These guys pontificated for an hour on this interview, and I asked them, I'd done some work with some homeless shelters for women in the area. And I asked them, hey, there's these shelters. And he goes, oh, no. In fact, when we tell our new students that they need to look to the person to their left and the person to the right, and one of you is not going to make it because this is a very conservative industry, and we don't have anyone who's got any kind of drugs or drink. And it's like, these women were not drugs, drinks, and dementia. It was death, disease, divorce, disaster. It was battered women. It was deception. It was people stealing a business. It was someone quitting their job to take care of an aging parent and then got kicked out when the parent died. Women who had degrees, women who had businesses before, and just needed a chance to start over. Yet it's this, these perceptions, and then suddenly they're churning out these operators, and they don't prepare the workforce. If these universities, we're sending lots of money to universities for DEI and everything else. But if they're not coordinating with the workforce, and the workforce is prepared to take in new, a much more diverse workforce, you might, that's like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, I always think it's interesting, so much of our industry, including myself, is focused on outreach to youngsters, youth, K through 12. And we should be, because they need to know about these careers. But so much of the outreach that I see is a one-off. So these kids get one point of contact. At my utility, we do outreach at all three school levels. So grade school, secondary school, and high school. And then we've also worked with the community college to build a water operations and maintenance certification program. So we're trying to hit them repeatedly because, yes, for a very select few number of students, that one touch experience will spark something in them. But for most of them, they're going to forget about it, and they need reminded. The kind of recruitment that we need for this industry is worth much more than one 30 to 60-minute presentation about water treatment or one tour at a water treatment plant. Like, we have to make, as you like to say, water sexy. We have to make water sexy to bring people in. I think when you were talking about how the women trying to reenter the workforce or who had gone through something, death, whatever, the examples that you gave, I think the key point there is that men are never questioned about those things. So why are women being questioned? Why is it being held against women that they've had these life experiences? And maybe it's changed them a little bit, or maybe they're having a career change because of it. Maybe they left the industry and they're coming back, but you don't see men being questioned for those things. So that's where the problem lies.
I mean, we have a number of utilities that are very actively recruiting and onboarding men who are leaving prison.
Yeah.
Men who are leaving the military.
Mm-hmm.
All very important. But the concept of bringing in women who have experience, have degrees, and stepped out for a while and want to come back in.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. So it's a, we need industry level behavior change. We need industry level emotional intelligence and open-mindedness. We need people who are not so egotistical that they can be self-reflective and see where their shortcomings come from and recognize their unconscious biases and the ways that they're playing into the system that's been created. And on the flip side of that, I would say what I always say to women and anyone that's interested in gender equity or any kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion and justice is that the systems that are in place have taken years, decades, if not centuries, to put into place. And while we feel very impatient and we get really mad and we see those numbers that come out from the UN that say gender equity is not going to be achieved until 2050, or gender equity is not going to be achieved until 2080, the number has recently changed. I can't remember off the top of my head, but while we get mad about that and we feel like it is time, and it is time, I don't want to be misreceived on this, it is time, but we cannot expect to reverse years, decades, and centuries of the way that the culture has been set up in a short amount of time. So we have to look for progress, not perfection. Women have to be patient, and I'm not going to tell women how to handle situations because that's very personal and that's all their own. But I would say, that we have to remember that this is ingrained in our culture. It's not always that an individual is just a jerk and has taken this position. It's around them everywhere. This is what we have been taught our entire lives. So we're not taking on a small feat. We're taking on a giant challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more we can get support throughout the industry, and hopefully we have men watching us as well, and women at all levels of their career, and people who are in positions that we can really institutionalize and codify and develop procedures to ensure that it's not just around if you're lucky and you have someone at the top who supports it and isn't that great? It's like, yeah, but if they leave, it can change like that.
Right, exactly.
So you are doing tremendous work. You are a tremendous role model. I'm just listening to you speak and knowing that you're a water professional and not a gender studies professor who has nothing to do with it. It's all theory, so you can use these terms and talk about this stuff. And I often do not hear women openly use words like this, talk about the kind of things that you're talking about. And I'm really grateful that you're in an environment that you can work in water and, have the support to be talking about this, and that it doesn't, doesn't turn into backlash on you. And unfortunately, I think a lot of women, they do experience that. I've experienced that. Oh, you're intimidated. But it shouldn't be like that. You should, if you're good at your job, you should be able to do your job, have opinions, be able to speak up for yourself and for women more generally. And I hope that with this program, and I hope all of you out there taking notes, that record, back up the video or whatever, or get the power pack so you can watch it over and over again. Get all those statistics and type in the chat your experiences. Brianna will be able to see that chat. With the power pack, we are opening this new, we're trying out this Mighty Networks, which is an alternative to, LinkedIn and Facebook, and it's private and off, they're not selling ad space and that sort of thing. And to be able to have a safe space, need these safe spaces to start talking privately first, so that we can be ready to talk, in more public spaces. And I'm so grateful to you and all of the amazing women and one trans man who have been part of this summit, and willing to have the courage and the candor to have these powerful conversations. So, Brianna, thank you. Any final thoughts? And we will have on the side of this video, links, places if you've got copies of your report that people can download, places they can find out about your events. We're happy to share all of that as part of the summit. Anything you'd like to call attention to, or any last thoughts for the audience?
A couple. So I just want to be clear, I do experience backlash. I'm experiencing it pretty hard right now from a very specific person in another department. But what I always say is I was born a fiery redhead, and that does not give me a personality with which to back down. So working through some things still, even within my own staff and interdepartmentally, it's always a battle. It's never easy. And it can be jading at times, but then I get my passion back and I'm like, all right, let's do this again. So, in terms of like general advice, what I always say is be brave, be bold, be you, because that's all that we can do. That rhymed. I didn't mean for that to rhyme at the end, but it really is all that we can do. And be brave doesn't mean you have to stand up and protest. Being brave means choosing what's best for yourself. And I know you will share all the information, but our research projects, the reports for our research projects can be found at her2o.org.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for making time for this. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Keep coming back for all of the great interviews that we have in this phenomenal summit. I'm just blown away at the response that we've had, and hope that this can be a beginning of a conversation. So keep coming back, y'all. Brianna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
See y'all soon. Thanks so much for joining us for this extraordinary conversation, one of 45 extraordinary conversations we had as part of the Women of Water Get Real virtual summit, where we explored where and why women are leaking from the water career pipeline, how we can stop those leaks, and even bring women back to water. I hope that you will enjoy all of these amazing interviews. If you don't have a chance to watch all of them during the summit, you have the opportunity to join us with a power pack and get lifetime access to all the videos, as well as an opportunity to join us for 30 days in a brand new community where we will dig even deeper in live facilitated conversations about some of the issues that are facing women in water. Look forward to seeing you there. Please join us at watercitizen.org/women, watercitizen.org/women for more information. See you again soon.